Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly O'Horo, and this is Adaptable, Behavior Explained. Hi there. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name's Kelly O'Horo. I'm your host of Adaptable, Behavior Explained. And today we're going to talk about a topic that so many couples quietly struggle with. And it is one of the presenting issues that most people on our couch talk about as a therapist. And most people don't say it out loud, but this is the feeling of drifting apart in our marriage. And this doesn't have to necessarily be in midlife, although that's a more common time for it to happen. Maybe you're noticing growing distance. Maybe life feels like logistics and roommates and organizer of a business instead of a partnership. Or maybe you feel like a roommate, not a teammate. Maybe you're grieving closeness, or you remember and reminisce about things that you used to have and don't know how to get it back. But relationships are meant to evolve, and the way we connect has to evolve too. And something that has evolution can feel uncomfortable or confusing or painful. And I often tell people as we change, like when we get married, we're not meant to be stagnant and remain the same. We are meant to grow old together. And so that requires evolution. And so today we're going to talk about why intimacy often fades in midlife, how hormones and stress, perimenopause and burnout change our emotional availability, and how old shame and cultural messages can shape our comfort with closeness. We're going to talk about how to re-educate ourselves when our bodies change and our lives change, and how we can rebuild emotional intimacy and safety, and how couples can gently reconnect without pressure or blame. And so hopefully you're in the right place. So let's take a breath, because you're not alone, and hopefully you're going to leave this episode feeling rejuvenated and hopeful about what your life can change, or how your marriage can change back into more of a connected way. So intimacy rarely fades because people stop caring about each other. It usually fades because our life gets too heavy. Our midlife brings a cluster of changes that layer one on top of the other. Starting with perimenopause and hormonal shifts in both men and women. We end up with mood swings. We've got exhaustion, disrupted sleep, irritability, and this makes it harder to remain open and connected with our partners. We also oftentimes deal with stress and mental load of our jobs and our families. We've got kids. They're sometimes teenagers. We've got aging parents that require more demand of us, demanding careers. Oftentimes in midlife, we're kind of at the prime of our career, and this is when personal lives become so stressful as well, depending on the ages of our kids if we have them. So when our nervous system's in that survival mode, connection becomes secondary. It's not what we focus on. And that's really why oftentimes in midlife we experience this. We run into identity shifts oftentimes at this point as well. Things like becoming an empty nester, or maybe we end up in a career transition because we've been promoted, or we're in a position of more leadership and management at this point in our life. All coupled with our body changing and how things aren't as easy physically as they used to be. This grief all can erode our internal stability. And I think we don't disconnect from one another quickly. It takes time. These attachment ruptures happen slowly over time, and these small disconnections add up. These look like missed bids for attention. This is you put your hand on your partner's back and they don't really notice or return the touch because they're distracted or they're disconnected from their own world. This is maybe unresolved conflict. All couples go through a negative interaction cycle where we have conflict. Constructive tension and conflict are part of every relationship, and some couples, they don't necessarily resolve. They just go along and get along. They separate and they disconnect from the conflict, and then they come back as if nothing ever happened. And this pattern over time, this rupture, will create disconnection. So we have to circle back when we have conflict and revisit the thing that we had conflict about. Otherwise, it turns into resentment, and old resentments will breed disconnection. And so busy seasons of life that never seem to end, and it's always the next thing we have to plow through, can be part of this rupture or disconnection that happens over time. So let me give you an example that might resonate for you. I'm thinking about a couple that once talked every night, and now they just coordinate schedules. So it used to look like, what did your day look like? And tell me about your good and your hard things. And then they stopped doing that. Or maybe you have a partner that once reached for affection And now they're just too tired to initiate closeness. And you perceive that as rejection. And so then you feel alone, and then you don't reach out to try to get that ball rolling again. Or maybe someone who once felt confident now withdraws because their body has changed and they don't feel sexy or attractive anymore. And so they stay small or they stay covered all the time. And that pull away can feel like rejection. Intimacy doesn't fade because you stopped loving each other. It oftentimes fades because you stopped having space to see each other as you are. And so, like I said, if you're in midlife and this is happening to your relationship, it's not too late to learn. So this is like an opportunity for re-education. Who are we now? One of the things that happens in midlife is that we think we are supposed to function at 40, 45, and 50 the same way that we did when we were in our 20s. But our bodies and our needs and our emotional capacities evolve and they change. And so we need to relearn like how chronic stress affects our ability to connect and our willingness to reach out, and how your body signals overwhelm and how that capacity can become less so, how our hormones shift our mood and our energy levels, and what actually feels grounding and supportive and connecting today, not 10 or 15 years ago. And we need to understand what that looks like. So, for example, someone might like formerly have decompressed through conversation. Now maybe they need quiet first before they reach for connection. Or maybe a partner once craved physical closeness. Now they need emotional repair before they can open up. And I really believe that our love languages change over time. So if you're a fan of the love language work, I suggest taking the quiz again as you age, because what you like and what you need for connection and vulnerability and intimacy often changes as we mature. Another example might be that a partner becomes more sensitive and then the other may be more avoidant, and not because of rejection, but because their systems are adapting to that perception of rejection. And so we have to talk about, my face and my huffs and my puffs right now don't mean I don't want to be with you. It means that I feel already overwhelmed about the list of things I have to do tomorrow. And we need to talk to our partners and invite them to tell us what's going on in their world. I like the term intimacy, into me you see. That cultivates understanding about who we are now, not who we were before. And it lets our partner understand the differences. And, it's happening to them as well. We are going through these changes together. And so now we've got to talk about shame and upbringings and how sometimes religious culture or family culture, how it shapes the way we view closeness and how our family of origin affects how we view what it should look like. I'm sure you've heard about people who end up sleeping in separate rooms as they age, and that their parents or their grandparents don't sleep together. And that forms what we think is normal or what we think is healthy. So many adults carry these old scripts, often from our childhood or our early culture or religious upbringing and our environments. And those things shape how we relate to our bodies, our emotions, and our partners. So if you grew up with messages like your body is shameful or keep it covered or things like that, you're going to have those messages in adulthood. Or your feelings are too much, or I'll give you something to cry about. Those messages teach us we need to keep our emotional world in because we're going to burden the grown-ups around us. Or your needs are selfish. You always need to put other people first. Then we don't understand that we have to look at what we need in order to express what we need so that we can cultivate connection. Or sometimes we were given messages that intimacy is dangerous or inappropriate, or that men or women are bad or gross or disgusting because of how we were programmed. Or maybe good people don't express desire because that's dirty or naughty. And so all of these things impact our perception of closeness, and it can feel really confusing in adulthood. And so, again, this can create adults who feel disconnected from themselves or their bodies, their needs, and make them struggle to express their emotional needs or their physical needs. Perhaps they fear vulnerability or feel embarrassed wanting connection and not knowing how to ask for it. Or it shapes their beliefs that they should be strong or self-controlled or unbothered by the things that bother them. And we're often trying to build healthy intimacy inside of systems that trained us to disconnect from ourselves and from others. And so unlearning takes time. Please have grace and patience with yourself. Unlearning the beliefs that affection must be earned. Unlearning the idea that needing closeness is weakness. These are all bad scripts. These are tapes that are not accurate. Unlearning that the body should be shamed or hidden, that's not helpful. Or unlearning the myth that intimacy comes naturally and that it doesn't take effort and work, because you can't build closeness on top of shame. But you can absolutely heal the shame and make room for closeness and intimacy and connection, but it takes work. And emotional intimacy requires vulnerability. And typically, especially in midlife, emotional intimacy has to come before physical intimacy. And so connection grows from like emotional safety. Without it, every kind of closeness becomes a lot harder. And in midlife, we've developed more capacity that I can handle things on my own and I don't need my partner quite so much if we've had a long stint of disconnection. And so we need reassurance that we need each other and that we want each other. We need to really actively work on repair when there's disconnection or conflict. We need to actively show appreciation, not just for the big sweeping things that our partners do for us, but for the little moments. My husband makes me coffee most mornings, and it's so much appreciation. And we have a little rule that he can't drop it off to me while I'm getting ready unless we kiss and I give him a hug and thank him for it. And so these little moments really do add up. Having consistency and stability in the relationship is so important. Having attuned communication, put your phone down, give your partner eye contact, give them touch while they're talking with you. It's very important to say, I see you, I hear you, and most importantly, that you matter to me more than whatever I'm distracted with. And that message sends a lot of safety to the relationship. Emotional safety, again, needs to happen before physical safety. And then we got to be patient with each other. We're all managing so much stress, overwhelm, and demands. Our lives are demanding so much of us. And so we need to have softness and slow down. So let's talk about how this changes sometimes and how this can build up and be hard in a relationship. Let's say you're a partner who's spent years caregiving, and then over time you just start to feel invisible and you start to withdraw because you're just tired and you don't feel seen. Or maybe you're someone who expresses frustration instead of hurt. So you get angry or irritable instead of saying, I feel lonely or unseen or like I don't matter, which leads the other person to retreat. Again, if you show up with frustration or anger that's too high, our listener we don't have an audience. And so then they'll withdraw and you're not going to get your needs met. Small dismissals are not nothing. They're really important. The eye roll, the shutdown, the huffs and puffs that you might do under your breath, the argument never revisited after conflict. These all stack into like protective walls. And then we have to really take time to remove those bricks one by one. And that takes a lot of effort. Before rebuilding closeness, couples usually need to rebuild trust in each other's responsiveness. Like, I see you, I want to notice you, and I want to invest in our connection, because our bodies won't open up when our heart doesn't feel safe or seen or trust that it's okay to be vulnerable. So again, these are the problems, but we've got to talk about practical ways that we can rebuild connection if this is happening in your relationship. And again, it doesn't have to only be midlife. This can happen in other phases of life. And I would say that really with most issues, the first step is to slow down. And in relationship, we want to slow down together, not for tasks, but for presence. Share a walk, share a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, a few minutes without screens. This has been such a demise of relationships. Screens are constant. Look around at a restaurant sometime. Look at people on dates, both people on their phones. Set some rules for your relationship and time in connection that is devoid of screen time. Use curiosity instead of assumptions. One of my favorite things is I say to my husband, I make up that when you do this, this is happening. So you want to ask, what do you need more of? What do you need more of lately? Something that my husband and I do every evening is we say, what does your night need to look like because of whatever you went through today? And then it requires us to slow down enough to think about, I need alone time, or I need some quiet time, or I need to organize my closet because I just need to have an illusion of some control somewhere because today was chaos. And I think it's important that you check in. What's been weighing on you? What was hard about today? What was good about today? Or maybe how can I support you this week when you look at your calendar ahead? What would that look like? And really, it's important to know what are your needs now that might not be the same as they used to be, because that curiosity, it opens the door and assumptions close the door. And so we want to really not be stuck with assumptions. Something that's really critical to master couples or bringing yourself back into connection is to repair the little hurts. It's saying things like, I'm sorry, or I didn't realize that impacted you. Can you tell me more about what that was like? Sorry, I missed you there in that moment. Because repair builds trust. And when we have trust rebuilt, we end up with more emotional safety, which cultivates connection. We also really want to validate stress, because a lot of times no one around us in our day is. Midlife is really heavy. So you want to say things like, I know it's a lot, and I see how hard you're trying, and I know it's overwhelming, and sometimes I just don't know how you do it all, because feeling seen is deeply connecting. Really, that's what all of us want, no matter what phase of life we're in, is to feel seen and understood. But as far as another thing that can help rebuilding connection is rebuilding micro moments of presence. So these are those small physical touches, a gentle hand on the shoulder or on the back, just a soft glance and a grin, shared laughter, thank yous more often than not, and appreciation, because closeness will grow in these micro moments. Connection isn't rebuilt through grand gestures. It's small moments. It's rebuilt through consistent, gentle presence, little moments that say, I see you, you matter to me, you're important to me, and that's more important than anything that I'm currently dealing with or doing. Disconnection in midlife doesn't mean that you're failing. It's just a sign that says, knock, knock, we need to pay attention. We need to check in with what's going on. We need to update how we're showing up for each other with love now as our relationship has evolved, because our bodies change, our lives change, and therefore our relationships change. But our connection can absolutely be rebuilt through presence, through communication, and through, most often, compassion. So if you are feeling distant from your partner, you're not alone. Nothing's wrong with you. We just have to relearn how to show up in connection in a new way. So if this episode resonates with you, please share it with a friend, subscribe, give us a like if you found it helpful, or toss in some comments that are relevant, and let's help our community weather this storm together. Because like I said, everything is rebuilt in connection. And you have a community here too. So thank you so much for tuning in. And until we meet again, don't forget to lead with love. It'll never steer you wrong.